All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Matt Taggart.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, this might sound like an embarrassing question because I think we've been friends for so many years, but in the podcast world, would you prefer to be introduced as Matthew?
I would prefer to be introduced as
I,
Matthew,
I,
but I will
s-
not. If you forget, it's not.
I said Matt and I immediately felt
It's
funny.
all right. It's no
And
That's
worries.
funny.
so I was like, that just doesn't sound right. I just never thought
Well,
about it very clearly. I was like, no, it's Matthew.
nope,
Um,
no worries.
it's the beard.
Yeah,
Matthew. It's a full name, you
it's a
know?
rich beard. Yeah,
Yes. Well, Matthew Taggart, friend of ours for nearly a decade, film school co-alum, Brigham Young University. Um, Matthew has shot many, many short films. He's directed a recently released feature film, which we'll get into detail, called The Counterfeit Kid. And he's done a lot of sort of corporate level video production work as well. And and Counterfeit Kid is not your first film.
it's my first one that I directed, but it's not my first film.
Okay.
Well, it's the first. I should say it's the first one I'm credited as the director.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I
Right.
remember it was kind of
There's a
complicated.
dramatic backstory to the other one. We
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
get into that as much as you want or don't want. But but I mean those are good stories. So the
Did we miss
your
anything?
skill sets include directing. I think you're a really talented writer. I know you have a lot of post skills in terms of being able to like just kind of get a video production thing from beginning to end done, you know.
hmm
Um, so I don't know if I want to list all your skill sets because we got
It's
to get into the content,
we
but
don't have time for the martial arts or the
um,
dance
sure.
skills either.
I'll also
That's stuff.
mention husband, father of three, and currently a Colorado
Resident.
native resident. Not
Resident, yeah,
native,
a
not
Wyoming
native.
native.
Wyoming native, that's right. All right. So thank you.
He's got the
Anyway,
shirt too to show.
thanks for being on. And we're just I don't know how this hasn't happened sooner. Probably because we stopped doing this podcast for a year. But
Well, which is a
glad
shame
it's
because
fun.
I'm a big fan. And that's not just blowing smoke. I think you guys, I think you're addressing a lot of things that don't get brought up in other. I can't remember if I texted you all this or not, but I sometimes have a hard time listening to film podcasts because they just seem to kind of talk in circles and never, just they give you these platitudes like, well, just follow your dreams or just go out and make something and it will
Work
happen.
hard.
It's like, yeah, I mean, that's only a part of it. And getting into the nitty gritty, I think, is a much more beneficial realm to be in. I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
just
Really
super sweet.
appreciate
We do
it.
appreciate
And I
that.
know you have a lot of great insights to offer. So I've told you before, our audience is mostly filmmakers trying to make their first feature film. Um, will you tell us a little bit about, if we're just going to jump right in, the story of, well, we watched The Counterfeit Kid last night. Had
Thank you.
a good time on the couch watching your movie and eating some frozen bananas with chocolate and seeing Brando in something different than what we worked
It's
with him
weird, isn't
on. So
it?
that was
When I
So
that
watched,
was cool.
so for
eh,
the listeners' sake, the lead in The Counterfeit Kid is also the lead in The Loved and Lost, which has yet to be publicly released, but is finished and is really just down the line. So it is funny because I've spent the last 3 years of my life seeing Brando in a very specific role, and I can hardly imagine a more different role than our two
no,
films using the same actor. And it was fun. It
It was
was
I felt
fun.
fun to
this.
see.
I felt the same way when I watched y'all's movie. Same exact reason. Where it's just like, and because in a sense I've spent more time with the character Jack than I have Brando himself. Seeing him in a completely different role as a father, uh, it's a lot of fun. But he's a great actor, so of course he makes it work.
Yeah, and he was actually a new father when he filmed that with us, so that was cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, getting back into that. So we watched the movie, we enjoyed it. Take us back to where you first decided to make it. Came up with the idea. How did you make this become something that goes from an idea to like a real thing that I can just go buy and watch?
And even before that, if I could
Yeah.
start even earlier, this is bad screenwriting. We need to get into it. And it's starting where the story really starts. I want the backstory, the lore. Like, did you always know you wanted to make feature films?
Oh yeah, that's
movies,
going way
you
back.
know, and then let's get into how this first movie started.
Well, I've always been a movie person. That was part of the culture of the family that I grew up in. We went to the movies every week, pretty much. Um, and it didn't matter what the genre was. I mean, my parents were smart about what the topic was or what the, rating was, certainly, but we might go see a drama one week, we might go see a comedy the next week, and we would always discuss it on the drive home. Um, so there was always this kind of culture of art and movies and discussing it beyond just having a good time. That being said, it was always a really good time. And so I've always loved movies, and but it wasn't really until in high school I got a job. This, as cliche as this is, I got a job at our video store. It was right when DVDs were coming out, so it was the video store was transitioning from VHS tapes to DVDs, which really was a great time, I think, in filmmaking in general. But that opened my eyes to the possibility that I could do something with that, that it wouldn't just be a hobby that I enjoy on Saturdays or Friday nights. And so, yeah, some of my friends and I, we would make these movies in high school, and started kind of exploring that then. And then once I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And after that, I actually went to the University of Utah for film, and I dropped out because I got a job working for a industrial company that was a lot of fun, and I was making more money than a lot of my friends who had graduated film school. And so yeah, I kind of stayed there, but then I got the bug to go back to school, and so I went back where I met you two. Um, so I don't know. That's maybe even more lore than I don't want to
No, that's good. It's
get
good.
in the
So
weeds.
at the industrial company, were you doing video related work or were you just, oh,
Yeah. So I got hired. It was funny because I got hired as I had made friends. I made a short film that a friend of a friend saw, and the director of all the industrial videos, it was a health and beauty instructional video company.
Hmm.
So they would do these videos to teach people how to do certain types of haircuts, or certain types of, we did a video about Botox and dermal fillers, like just any type of health or beauty thing you could think of, we did a video. And the director saw my short film. He became one of my first mentors, and he hired me as a PA,
Mm.
which, as a member of our church, one of my tasks was to make coffee for everybody. And my first day on set, I've never made coffee, and so I did my best, and everyone took a sip and was just like, "What is this?" And well, I don't know. And so I got kind of fired from being the PA, and I got reassigned to be one of the camera operators. So I failed
that's,
upward, which was
that's
That's
awesome.
good.
awesome.
And yeah, and like I said, he was one of my dear friends. I made, I don't even know how many short films with him over the years. Still he was one of the groomsmen in my wedding, just one of my absolute favorite people in the world. Um, and so yeah, worked with him.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Yeah, it's so funny because like I'm still bad at that. Like accommodating the needs of people who are different than me. Not because I'm like trying to be mean. It's just like sometimes you get in your own head and you got plenty of stuff to think about, especially like I was directing a set and the art director comes up to me and he's like, "Hey man, I think everyone's lagging a little bit. And I think if you just got a big box of Joe or something, we could get things moving." And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I just drink water, I guess." But yeah, who do I do? And I was like, well, there's this kid from the priest quorum who's PAing, you know, like from our church. And I was like, do you want to go buy a ton of coffee and not like, you know, I don't know, don't tell your parents. It's like, everyone probably thinks we sound really awkward and backward and silly, but that is just, it's just a funny thing. It's a funny thing. We're just so coffee ignorant,
Yeah,
us.
it's just not my thing. I don't like hot chocolate. So I mean, I'm just,
Oh,
Well,
really? I mean,
that's
I
yeah.
can do
where
hot chocolate.
Anna
I
and
can
you
do
might
that one.
diverge a little bit, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
if you don't drink it, it's like, how do I even know if it's good? Like, you can't taste it. You just taste it for me.
that's funny.
But
Well, okay, so now I guess we transition into what Anna had asked, which was like, okay, so now you go to BYU, which is where we met you. What happens there? You graduate and then Counterfeit Kid exists.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a backtrack in between. I left the industrial company and started producing a TV show out of Wyoming called The Best of the West. It was a hunting and kind of outdoor adventure reality series.
Mm.
And I was there for, I think, 5 years. I did 100 episodes, 125 episodes, a lot of episodes. And while I was there, we had started to develop a project. I don't have the poster behind me. But we started to develop a project that was going to be an outdoors type movie with a killer bear, like basically Jaws, but a grizzly bear in Wyoming rather than Amity Island. And I mean, the script got written. We had had a lot of talks, and nothing ever happened. I went back to school, and while I was at BYU, the opportunity to revisit that and potentially make that movie came up again. I still am really good friends with my old boss at Best of the West. He was a big part of Counterfeit Kid, actually. But I Jeff Parkin put me in touch with Ian Hawks, who you guys have also worked with, and said, I think you two might be good to, kind of work on this project as writing partners, because I had gone to Jeff just for advice about how to do this bear movie. And so Ian and I rewrote the bear movie. We had a couple pitch meetings and things like that it just never, we had geared up because it was kind of like, okay, well, this is going to happen. And then it just, like, the floor kind of fell out from underneath us. And that summer, I just had this idea that had been kicking around in my head for a long time, this Western movie. And so I just sat down over the 4th of July weekend and wrote the first draft of Counterfeit Kid, which was called, at that point, it was called The Treasure of Rust Creek. And I took it to Ian. I didn't tell him that I would, he was my writing partner at the time. I didn't tell him I'd been working on this. I called him on like the 5th of July or 6th of July. And I was like, hey, I'm going to drop something off on your front porch and just, let me know when you get it. And so that's all I like being, a little bit of a showman there and mysterious. So I dropped off the script and he read it and he was like, holy cow, like, this is amazing. Like, why, like, where did this come from? And I was like, well, I've got this time that we had set aside for the bear movie, and I don't want to waste that. I know that this would be an incredibly quick turnaround time, but I think we should do this Western instead. And so yeah, that's kind of what happened. Ian and I then started to write it. He put a polish on it. I put a polish on it. We went back and forth a couple of times and finally arrived at the vision, or the version you see on screen. But the other kind of really cool part of this, and I don't know if Brando ever talked to you guys about this, but I had worked with Brando on 2 separate short films where I was the DP. I wasn't actually, so in a sense, I didn't really interact with him all that much other than filming him. I didn't really have conversations, but I loved his performances. I loved what he was bringing. And so the whole time I wrote the movie, I kind of was like in my mind thinking, like, who would be good at this would be Brando. And the same day that I had dropped off the script at Ian's house, I went to the gym, the Provo Rec Center. And as my wife and I were leaving with our kids, Brando was coming in. And so I walked up to him. I was like, hey, I don't know if you even remember me. But weirdly, I wrote something I'd love for you to take a look at. Like, I wrote something with you in mind. And he's like, yeah, like, great. Send me the script. And I
He was
didn't find
probably
out.
pretty flattered.
What a lucky
I know
guy.
Brando
He's had multiple scripts written
Well,
for
but
him.
for
I
him.
didn't know it until much later, but I didn't know this till we were filming Counterfeit Kid. We were sitting late one night. I took him to where he was staying, and we were just kind of having a conversation in the car. And he goes, that day that you approached me in the gym, I was literally in my car about to go in the gym thinking, I don't know if I want to keep doing this acting thing. Like, I don't know if this is, I need some sort of a sign, or I need some sort of, just something to kind of give me a shot in the arm. And then he walked in, and so again, when he told me that, I just got goosebumps. And I thought, like, I'm a big firm believer in providence, and it certainly seemed to be the case. He came on board right away and helped us with all the casting and things like that. Just having that anchor there where we kind of knew, well, we know we're going to go with Brando. So who can we get that fits in well, and you know, build up this cast as a ensemble rather than just a showpiece for just Brando.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
that's so fun. Well, so I feel like as I watched the film, and first of all, thanks for keeping Brando in the game because I think we'll all benefit from that.
I'm
Yeah.
sure he would have gotten another sign if it hadn't have been me. I
Well,
don't.
maybe, but
But it
hey, you
was
know
you.
what? You were,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Um, okay, that brings up one of the things that I noticed first of all was, well, I will say I really liked the script. I actually feel like um, this is a indie scrappy movie. But even then, like a lot of those, the script is just a mess, right? And I think on this one, I could feel Ian Hawke's in there actually.
I felt it too. I
I
was
think
like,
I was
oh,
like,
there's his
oh,
fingerprints
I can
on
see
this.
some of Ian's fingerprints, but I also just thought that like the overall structure, I was like, this central character makes sense. The causality of the script, I thought followed really strong logic, and it all felt very motivated in that like um obviously it's a comedy and there's like a little bit of simplification to like the I'm gonna go out in the world and make a name for myself. It's like, what's
Yeah,
your logic
sure.
there? It's like, because I'm got to, it's like, and
Yeah,
that's fine. Like that works for his like sort of the
it works
sillier
for the
nature.
style of movie it is, I think.
Yeah, the sillier nature of the
Hmm.
thing. But then within that realm, like, you watch a movie like What's Up, Doc, where you're like, I don't know, I guess Barbara Streisand's character just is hungry the whole movie. I'm not really sure what her motivations are, but like, but the comedy and the rhythm and the sort of Looney Tunesness of that world functions. So I think yours is kind of it's not quite as absurd, but it's in that genre, and I feel like his character works, and then all these side characters by act three, all their stakes and all their desires and plots just converge in a way that felt I didn't feel like there was a wasted character in the
Well,
movie.
that's good. Yeah.
And that's hard to do, like really hard. And you shot your script. And so I thought the script was strong, but I also noticed that there was just a big cast. And I'm like, I know you guys were doing this, scrappy. And so like how on earth did you manage? You had like bartenders and extras in a lot of scenes, a lot of extras and
Horses. Yeah, there's some
horses, and
logistics
so
for
there's some
sure.
logistics here where I was going, okay, they're either pulling a lot of favors or they're bringing in some money or both, or but you
Yeah,
guys
let's
pulled
talk about
together a
that
pretty
part
big
too.
scope
Because
of
so I do like coaching, weekly coaching with groups of people who are doing this process. And right now, a lot of them are at this stage where they have a finished script, they have the pitch, they have it all planned out. They're just trying to get the financing to make it real. Some of them have actors attached, have crew attached, have um, even a proof of concept put together,
Hmm.
but they're struggling to get the financing they need. So where, once you have a finished script, an idea, where did you guys take it from there to get the financing? And if you're comfortable sharing what the budget was, that would be helpful. But if not, I understand. What did that part of the process look like?
Yeah. Well, and that's the part of this that just stinks, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the few art forms that just is so dang expensive. I mean, maybe if you want to be a NASCAR racer or an F1 racer, like the entry price to buy the cars and the parts to make that dream come true, that might be the only thing I can think of. Or, if you want to be an astronaut, I guess you can't really just do that on your own. But um, no, so we funded the movie ourselves, my wife and I. My wife is the producer of the film, and um, I mean, I am not a huge modern day Hollywood doesn't hold much for me, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe there's things about it that I'm missing, but I like the camaraderie and the scrappy nature of making independent films.
Yeah.
And I think it's an underappreciated type of film. Um, so all that being said, I didn't approach this as we're making a Hollywood movie. I approached this as we're a local band that's going to put on a great show and you're going to love it, but we're not the Rolling Stones, right? Like to use a non-film example.
Yeah.
And so what can we do with our resources and with our abilities that would make that the best rock band you've ever seen at a local venue? And so we didn't, my wife and I are not rich. We're not, millionaires, anything like that. So our budget was pretty humble, and we were really upfront with our actors and our crew right off the get-go. I don't know that they knew that when they came into the casting sessions that we were, as scrappy, but the second we found actors that we liked, I called them up and said, we want to offer you this role, but just so you know, you will get paid. You will have you'll be fed, you'll be sheltered, we'll pay for your gas money driving up to Wyoming. All of those needs will be met, but you're not going to make a ton of money off this movie because we're funding it out of our own pockets. So we had that cash element, but then we had a lot of people who, again, Cody, Wyoming is such an interesting place. Cody is where we filmed it. It's where I grew up, because in some ways it is the middle of nowhere. In other ways, though, it has this connection with, well, Buffalo Bill founded the town, and Buffalo Bill, at one point in our nation and our world's history, was arguably the most famous person on earth, and he was a showman. He was an entertainer. He was a pioneer with film, with just all sorts of great things. And I feel like that spirit has stayed in Cody. So if you say, I'm going to make an album, I'm going to make a movie, I'm going to do this, people get behind the arts there in a major way. And so
And I think
I
there's a big
mentioned,
difference too, if you don't mind me
no,
interrupting,
no,
between the way you just said it, I'm gonna make a movie, versus I'm trying to make a movie, like, can you help me?
I'm waiting for someone to give me a light that is green.
I think that when people
yeah.
approach it that way, it feels very like they're not gonna maybe get the same support as when you just say, I'm making a movie, and then people want to jump in and be part of it.
110%.
Even Napoleon Dynamite, right? That whole town in Idaho, where they were like Joe Hess talks about like everyone in Preston, Idaho. Was that where it was shot?
I think so.
I think so. Somewhere Idaho. I think it was Preston. He's like everyone knew about the movie, like because we had like hijacked the whole high school. Like we had hijacked everybody. Like, and it was like we'd call
Yeah.
people and be like, "We need a cow for the movie," and they'd be like, "Oh, someone can get you a cow." Just the town made that movie almost.
And that's, I mean, well, and the great thing about Wyoming is, even if you're not a cowboy, you probably have a cowboy hat, pair of boots. You've got something in your closet that you can give. And so my old boss at Best of the West, when I told him I was gonna, since he knew the bear movie wasn't happening, he said, "Well, if you need horses, just let me know."
Mm.
And so I said, "Well, since you're offering, yes, we do need horses." and and to your point, there's so many things too that I think were just, I mean, miracles sounds heavy, I'm sure, to some people, but I don't think so. I think it's a pretty accurate way to describe it. We had so many miracles, and one of them was the day before we started shooting with all those horses. We had a horse wrangler, that was going to come, and they got into a. I mean, this is again just one of the things you deal with if you're in Wyoming. Got into a bar fight and fled the state, and so
Wow.
now we have these horses, and I'm comfortable riding a horse. I know how to do it. I know how to saddle a horse. I know how to do that. I don't really know how to direct a horse on camera. I don't know how to make sure that other people are safe. And so we just kept thinking, like, what are we going to do? I mean, this is horrible, because so that first day that we filmed with horses, every shot you see, it's someone holding the horses by the reins, like they're standing next to the horses. They're not actually riding them. Um, and we would have these kind of after action meetings in the evening when we get back to base. And I sat down. My wife acted as the UPM, and so I sat down with her. I sat down with our first AD, and which was Cameron Babcock, who you also know. And I just said, I don't know what we're going to do about this horse thing. And my wife excused herself from the meeting. She had a phone call, And one of our extras who had been in one of the scenes with a lot of extras called and just called my wife and said, "Hey, I just want to say thank you for letting me be a part of that. I had a blast. I don't know if you guys have anything else I could. I'm here for another 3 weeks. I'm between jobs. So if there's anything you guys, if you need me to move gear, if you need me to do this." And Stacy was like, "Well, no, we're pretty well covered, but thank you. We'll keep you in mind." And she goes, "Oh, well, the one other thing, I actually was a professional horse wrangler for a number of years. So I don't know if you guys need help with that." And it was just like, holy cow. Like, and so
Wow.
that next day, Virginia was on. Virginia is the preacher, the woman preacher at the end of the movie.
Oh,
So we had her act as well. She had done a stage play in Cody, and so we thought it'd be fun to put her in.
oh, but that
But
was genius. So she extraed first, and then
extra
you gave her that
first.
role, which I thought was brilliant because you have this like overzealous, like murderous disciple. I don't know what to call her. And she wants to hang everybody. And then at the very end in the wedding, you have a nice little insert of her, which I assume is the extra
No, that's supposed to be her preacher character just being a good
just
person.
there.
She
Okay.
repented and came
Oh,
back.
okay. All right. Because I thought that maybe that you guys had had her extra first, and I just went, "Whoa, amazing! Like you brought it all together in the third act." But that was
Yeah.
a retroactive plan.
So anyways, my point is that our cash budget was much different than our in favor budget.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that it's hard to put an exact
Right.
value on what that looks like.
That makes me really think about film school. If you remember, I don't know if this was your experience, but I felt like in like classes where we were all directing and like making a lot of stuff, there was this thing that we all ran into where everyone went, "I don't like telling actors like what to do. Like I feel so
Are you
bad."
changing the topic?
No, I'm not. But
Oh.
he's saying like um, this in kind budget, and it's like, uh, we sometimes are so scared to ask for things as filmmakers, and it's like you said, like she extra and was like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
great opportunity. That was so fun, and that was an experience we had with a restaurant in our film where the owner is just like, "We're just honored," and we're like, "We can't pay for the location. Can we shoot?" And she's like, "Yes." "Can we shoot during business hours? Because we don't have extras." And she's like, "Yeah." We are just honored. Like she was just delighted, and she played a little bit role, and she had a waiter who's like, "I have a waiter
Who's an
who's an
actor?
actor. He's just waiting tables here, and he would love to help you out." I'm like, "Great, we have a role for a waiter." And so like, like it was just so good. And then
And then they ended up feeding our cast and
for
crew.
free, like we were like, we're all gonna buy
Yeah.
breakfast here. We're gonna buy breakfast to like show our appreciation for this lady just going overboard. She goes, "Are you guys done shooting?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're done. We're all gonna," and she like cuts me off and says, "Order whatever you guys want off the menu. We're gonna feed you guys." And I was like, "No, we were gonna pay for it. We were gonna buy," and she goes, "No, it's our treat. We're just honored that you would use our restaurant in your movie." And it blows my mind that there are people.
That's Friend's Table in Peachtree City.
It's Jake on Peachtree City.
Go see
We
it.
we
Go.
love that there's people who movies are cool, you guys. Like, like people can be brought onto a movie and not even get paid sometimes.
Well,
And
and
if it's not a good fit, they can say no, but
I
they
think
want to
we
Yeah.
be a part
always
of it.
feel that like that I'm asking other people to help me, but really like you have a dream, I have a dream. Our
Brando had a
dreams
dream.
complement each other. That's what I'm saying. Like you reaching out to Brando was like an answer to his prayer. And I think sometimes we feel nervous to reach out and ask people to be involved without having like some compensation. But sometimes that's exactly what they're trying to get off the ground too.
Some
And
people actually like doing this. They don't necessarily have to get paid.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that was um two things there. I think that one of the negatives or maybe one of the things that doesn't come across clearly in film school is this idea that it's not about, well, it is about money. Like I said, it stinks that it costs so much money to do anything in film. Um, but there's a lot of that finances are not your only solution. There's
Mhm.
all these other ways to get around things. And I don't mean get around it in a Machiavellian, like sneaky way. I just mean there's other solutions that you can find and can present themselves if you just take a breath, slow down. It's just a movie. How can we address this without forking out another 10 grand? And so that's one thing. And then another thing, kind of to your point, uh, one of the things I love that you talk about a lot, and to be honest, you two are really the only other people I know who kind of speak in this way, at least on a regular basis. I don't know if you noticed at the end of the movie, at the end of the credits, I have 1 Corinthians 13, is 13:13?
Yes, it is. I saw it right under your Film 85,
Yeah, Falcon 85
Falcon
films.
85.
And I put that there very purposefully because I believe in a charitable narrative. And to me, that extends to the characters, that extends to the storytelling, that everyone in the movie has a shot at redemption. Everyone has some good quality. There's charity there. You're treating even maybe not the bad guy in the movie, but again, it's a little bit like a cartoon. It's okay that he's a mustache twirling villain, but um, everybody used to be treated with charity, and then that extends beyond where someone's going to give me access to their property and let me shoot on their property. I can't afford, we certainly couldn't have paid for permits to all the stuff. We had to pick where we spent our permit money, the waterfall, the cave, things like that. So we had to rely on people who said, I have a ranch, you can film on our ranch for free. Um, so in getting all those favors for us, it's important to me to know that, our second AC now works in Hollywood and was able to use the Counterfeit Kid as a calling card, as an entryway into getting in. I know that um, we had Cameron Babcock was our first AD in all the Wyoming stuff. In the Utah stuff, we had Keith Grover as our first AD. And I know Keith has told me that he was able to land some other jobs saying that he had been a first AD on a feature film. And I mean, there's plenty of people
Yeah.
in the movie that I could go through that have had that experience. And to me, that's how it should work, right? Like
Yeah.
a rising tide lifts all boats, and it's easy that the director gets a lot of credit for making a movie, but that's an unfortunate side effect, because really it's everyone who's in there with their, you know, picks and hammers trying to chisel this thing out. And if they can get something out of it that elevates them, that's really where the, like, I know that sounds cheesy, but like that's where the real reward to me of filmmaking comes from, is that it's this community, and you're making the world a better place, even if it's just like the movie isn't gonna, no one's gonna watch The Counterfeit Kid and then all of a sudden everything in Gaza and Palestine just, we figured it out, like, thank you, that's not gonna happen. But 2 or 3 people who worked on Counterfeit Kid might have their life turned around, and
Yeah.
then they'll be able to lift and bless the lives of other people. And to me, that's the most appealing thing about making a movie.
I love that. And I love that you're pointing out like all the good that happens before the final product even exists, and just to make it happen in the first place. I also love how you talked about like what we need to make it happen as a list of, we need locations, we need horses, we need people, a list of things that you need. And I think so often people budget, or they hire someone to do their budget, and they outline all these things they need and then translate that all into money. And then they start thinking we need money. And it becomes this focus on getting money, when really what you need is a horse wrangler, or what you
Yeah.
need is a location. And you could get that lots of different ways. It could be with money, or it could be with someone you know, or someone you meet, or someone who knows someone,
Well, and I mean, again, I understand the need for unions and like the way that Hollywood does a movie. I get it. I do. But we're not a Hollywood movie. So the only really rule I had on set is that I didn't want the actors to have to carry anything. But I carried gear to set every day. I helped clean up. I helped move stuff. Um, and I'm sorry, like I know that in Hollywood and even on some of the capstone films or things that were worked on at school, there was kind of that, you use that Hollywood type hierarchy. And I think that's important to learn. But there's also that component of, but we don't have that, like that, that luxury here. Everybody needs to be carrying a little bit more than their own weight. And, and again, like one of the great moments for me is the bad guy in the movie, Matt Mascaro. He won Best Actor at the Wild Bunch Film Festival. It's a Western film festival in Tucson. And I certainly think he's an amazing actor. Like I will always do my best to find him work, or put him in another movie. But the reason why that also meant so much to me is that multiple times on set, he would go to people and say, how can I help? Can I, and And I'm not saying that on a knock on anybody who didn't, because he was one of the actors. He had a pass. He didn't need to, but he still did it. And he went, just put in that extra. And so when he won that award, it meant like that
Mhm.
award meant a lot to me, because it was like, yeah, he earned that. He
He
deserves that.
pulled his weight and beyond
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
Yeah,
And
Right.
yeah.
I mean, I'll throw in that on our film, the similar thing happened where, like, I mean, we had a train day where we needed a train, and we had a plan for a train, which was sort of materializing as we were shooting. And then it was like last day to shoot, no train,
It fell through. Yeah.
everything was just a mess. And I just remember that day, like Brando holding C-stands and like
Helping us set up a green
we
screen.
turned Brando into a sandbag. And he had to like stand on the C-stand because he was basically holding a green screen sail, and it was going to get blown away because we were right next to a lake. And it was like we had to start picking up green screen shots because we were like, we need assets with our actor just in case. And in the end, they saw that we have some VFX in that movie that have convinced everyone. Like, and we
Yeah.
have no actor on none of our, top build actual character
We're
actors
actually there
were
when we
actually
shot.
there during a scene that is completely done with either green screen or body doubling, and it's invisible. The Brando's basically standing on C-stands that day. He wasn't even acting that day. He was just there. How can I help? And he could probably tell that we were all like oozing stress tears out of our eyes and stuff. But like, yeah, so he
Well,
wasn't
and
he wasn't like, and there's a SAG penalty for this labor. Like,
right.
like
Right. Well, and I don't, by pointing out Matt Mascaro, I don't want to insinuate. I mean, all of our actors and crew were amazing and definitely put in way more effort. I just single that out because I know that Matt picked a day where some other people definitely needed help, and he helped them on that day where it
Yeah.
was kind of a good instinct on his part. Um,
And that's kind
so
of how indie filmmaking needs to be approached, as
yeah,
opposed to, and I think that's the beauty of it too. Like you say, we don't have the luxury of having huge departments and everyone in their place, but I've worked on those films now that I have gotten into acting in the last year or two. I've sat on like Disney films and Netflix films, and there's something I love about indie films because they're so passionate. Everyone's like, we're in on this and we want it to be successful. And on those big budget films, it's a job and
yeah,
everyone's there to do their job. And if they don't have to do their job, they're sitting around, and there's a lot of people
and,
sitting
and
around, and
people need jobs, to your point, Matthew.
it's
Like,
important. Yeah.
there's a
yeah,
reason for these
absolutely.
things. Yeah, there's a
Mhm.
reason.
It's not evil, but it's not passionate like indie film tends to be. And so
Well,
there's beauty to that too, that I want to maintain.
Well, and I think too, the other thing is, and this is where I think you can make your movie sing a little bit better, not being a Hollywood movie, is the luxury you do have as an indie film is that you don't have to only rely on filmies to get it done. And
Yeah.
in Counterfeit Kid, he's in this, I put him as an associate producer. Um, the day before we started filming, Brando called me and said, "Hey man, I got a little problem." And I thought, "Oh God, is he like not going to make it the first day?" Or like, because he was still in Utah. And he said, "I have this friend who wants to work on the movie." And
Tyson. That's
yeah,
why we recognized his name and we were like, we know that name.
It's like,
That's
yeah,
right.
he's
Yeah.
one of
we like
Brando's best
Tyson.
friends. And
Tyson.
I said, I appreciate it, but we've literally spent all of our food budget. I don't think we've got any more beds that we could house him. And he goes, no, no, no. He's got an RV. He's going to drive up his camper. He's got all his own food. He'll pay for his gas. And I was like, okay, well, if this guy wants to come up, and great. And it was honestly one of the best decisions that happened in the movie, because Tyson, not being uh, this indoctrinated filmmaker where here's all the procedures you
Has to
do,
be
here's what a
this way.
C-stand is. That's not really his thing. But he was the type of guy where when you had a problem, he would go, we could probably fix that if we had the carbureting unit from a 1974 hot tub. I have a 73, but I could maybe make the 73. And you'd just be sitting there going like, what? And he'd
Who is
run to
this
his
guy?
truck and he'd get this part and he'd be able to fix the light or whatever. And just, he brought so much to the movie with that creativity that, again, in a sense, wasn't film based,
Yeah.
but it solve so many things where the three of us might say, can we get a C-stand to stretch out that far? And he would say, why? I don't even know what a C-stand is. I'm going to use this and it will work. Just having that person there who has a different perspective and different style of creativity, it made all the difference in the world.
I,
And
I,
he saved our bacon countless times.
so we started developing a movie with Brando that never happened, but Tyson was in those conversations because Brando was like, I'm not going anywhere without this guy after Counterfeit Kid.
It was another one out in the woods kind of.
Yeah. And he was like, it was in on location kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
and he was like, he was so helpful. We have to bring him along
He
again.
solved like 20 film crippling problems, like, and so
No, and it's fun too because his relationship with Brando is so just sweet and funny. There's the scene where Brando's in the river, and it was really cold. That's a tip. Don't film it in a river in September in Wyoming. But Brando was getting really cold, and again, one of those things that you find in that I wasn't there. I was talking to someone else, but the camera was still rolling, and watching this kind of behind the scenes moment that I had missed on set. Tyson comes up and kind of wraps Brando in a blanket, and Brando's like, yeah, it's cold. And Tyson just goes, oh, come on, princess, you'll be okay. And he starts rubbing his back and but again, it's just this, like, they're like brothers, where they can kind of razz on each other and just have this love for each other that was just really pretty dang fun. But
it's
anyways,
so awesome.
That's great.
Uh,
Yeah. I love that because you can, and so you can use your mom, you can use your friends. We had people, you mentioned someone from church. We had lots of people from church who came out when we didn't have sound, like to hold a boom or,
yeah, we had youth boom mopping and sound mixing basically on some days.
yeah.
That is to say,
and I
every
was sound
penny
mixing on some days and
that's true.
directing and like
Every penny we
holding a boom.
spent, especially on Martin White as a sound mixer, was well spent. But there were days we couldn't get anyone, and we had to just get a boom to get something, and it wasn't a dialogue heavy scene or whatever. That worked. I just say that because I don't want anyone going, I'll just use a teenager to sound mix my whole movie. I was like, no, I
No,
wouldn't suggest that. But
no.
there were days when we had to do that, and it worked out.
And again, this is where you can take a play out of the Hollywood playbook. And because if you pay attention to the credits of Counterfeit Kid, there's a lot of Taggarts in the movie. But
Is that the Hollywood playbook? Is nepotism?
yeah. But there's a strategicness to it. My mom got her degree in textiles and fabrics and materials. So she knows how to do costuming. She worked at the Buffalo Bill Museum and restored clothes from that time period.
Wow. I
So
actually
she
was
had
really impressed with the costumes on it.
yeah, no, the costumes were awesome. And
Great, yeah.
she worked with, because my wife has a great eye for design. And so the two of them working on the costumes. So it wasn't just like, oh, I think my mom can do that. It was like, well, no, she actually has a background in this. It's not film, but it's the same thing with two of our two makeup artists. One was my sister, one was my cousin. One is my cousin is a professional makeup artist for not for movies, but for, what would you call that? Like at a salon. Um, and my sister is really gifted at that. So I still picked people who, they may have my name, and so they'll do me this favor because they're family, but they have this as their background,
Well, and film encompasses almost everything
right.
at some point.
Right.
Anyone could be a resource in some way to some film based on their experience or their access or their knowledge. Like there's just endless resources there with the people and their skills that are unique.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked at Best of the West, one of the things that we had to do is make these commercials and for the various products that we sponsored and things like that. And we had this guy who, he was I don't know if he was an Olympic, I don't know the terms, but he was a marksman. He had won gold medals in rifle shooting and like he was a gun guy, and he was a gunsmith. So he built guns. But he was one of those people that I honestly feel like if I got hired to make a Star Trek movie or if they ever made a Master and Commander Part 2 where you're on the ocean, even though he's a gunsmith, if you said, I need a period specific or I need a spaceship part, he would come back with something amazing because he just had that ability within him. He had this creativity and this just we're shooting this commercial, and we were talking about adding some effects in After Effects, like some fire and some sparks. And he goes, why don't we just, I have this stuff back in the shop that could do that right here. And so we were like, okay. So we did it live and in camera, and it turned out a million times better, you know? So again, just, you got to be paying attention to the world around you and not get so insular in your film world that you're not able to see those people, those opportunities, and those things that are around you that will enrich your movie, enrich your life, and just hopefully make everything better for everybody.
Yeah, and then you can even
I
start a
probably need to
movie.
hear that, honestly. I think that's just really valuable.
It is really valuable, and I think my students really will benefit from that idea of like you can actually, instead of making a list of all the resources you need and looking for them, just make a list of all the resources you have and make something with that to start with.
Yeah.
Although if you do have a script and there are some resources you need, again, it's just it might be closer to than you think, and the people around
Definitely.
you.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, and
And
there's so much you
everyone
can
knows
do.
thousands of people, you know, so
Yeah. And there's so
everyone
much you
knows
can do when
someone.
it's still free, you know, like writing a script
Yeah.
is free other than a time commitment. That's just paper and pencil, really. And so you can think through, how are we going to get a train? How are we going to get a horse? I mean, and if we can't, let's think of a plan B now instead of when we're on set, you know. So there's
Yeah.
lots that you can do when it's still a little bit more economical.
So since you brought in people who were not local to Wyoming, um, and I guess they drove out, you said you covered their gas and then you housed them. I'm curious about just some of the details of that process. Like when you put the casting call, did you put a flat rate for the project or did you just put a day rate or um and then when they did come out, how did you house them? Did you rent a place or did you have a place or I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. So we put out uh an ad, I can't remember where we put it, uh Facebook Marketplace or something like that, or Utah
Mhm.
Actors, I can't remember exactly
Okay.
where. But it just said paid. We didn't
Mhm.
specify, it just said paid. And my father-in-law worked on the City Creek development. He was one of the kind of uh architects of that project, and there was an empty office, and he got permission for us to use that as a casting location where we could say, come in, we're going to be right here in City Creek.
Oh, cool.
So Brando came with me, and we had Mariah. Now it's well, I don't know, she's married to Sam Haskin.
Haskin, yes, Mariah
Why am I
Haskin
drawing a blank on her name? Anyways,
on her
Mariah
maiden
came
name.
in and filmed the auditions, and we had our first round of auditions there in Salt Lake. Brando read obviously his part and would read with actors.
Mhm.
And you know, I had seen that thing where George Lucas had done that with Star Wars, where he kind of tried groups of actors rather than just one person. And I wanted to just give that a shot. And so that's kind of what we did. And so then once we found the people we wanted, we told them, here's what you're going to get paid. It's a flat rate. Um, and then in terms of housing, I have an aunt who lives in Cody, who is just one of the most awesome people in the world. She's a great cook. And so I had actually approached her to just do our craft services,
Mhm.
because I knew that if I gave her a budget of money, she would be able to say, I can feed X amount of people with X amount of dollars, and I'll know how to do that. And then what she did is again, she was not a film person. So there was lots of, I guess, film protocol that she did not, you know, she didn't run it by our first AD every day on the call sheet, you know, what you were going to be having for breakfast or whatever. But she reached out to people in the community and said, hey, you're going to make a meal for this crew, and you need to deliver it to X location
Like she
at
paid
certain.
them or they were volunteers or
She used the money that we gave her, and then from there, you know, I think a lot of it was donated. Well, I know a lot of it was donated.
Mm.
Um, but so she took care of all the food, and then she also said, I will house, all of her kids are out of the house, and so she said, I've got all these empty rooms, so people can stay with me. So they stayed with my aunt at her house, they stayed with my parents at my parents house, and then I have an uncle and aunt who they live in Michigan. At the time, they were living in Michigan during part of the year, So their house was empty. And so we had kind of these 3 different locations, and, that worked out really well. And again, one of my favorite kind of moments from that is one day Brando, he kind of had it just as the main star. His schedule was probably the worst because he had to be spread out the most. And so there was one Tuesday or whatever it was where he wasn't on set, and he just went up to my aunt and he's like, "Well, what are you doing today?" And she's like, "Well, I got to go shopping." So he went and shopped with my aunt all day to buy food, and the 2 of them hung out and, just came back thick as thieves. But that's kind of how we handled that. And that one is a hard ask. That puts a burden on people to ask for use of their house. Um, so, there's certainly people that, again, I think with our cast, we weren't worried about it because I knew all of them weren't gonna, they were gonna be respectful. They weren't gonna be slobs. They weren't gonna, well, this is my room. I can do whatever I want. They understood that they were staying, uh, at someone's house, and they took care of the place. And
Yeah.
so,
That's great.
Well, that's really, really cool. I think it's a great example. I think if there is someone with the that particular resource, I would stress heavily that you take advantage of it because, I mean, within ethical boundaries.
Respectful way, yeah.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Yeah.
Like you guys did. And because that was probably our biggest expense on our film
It was
housing.
travel and housing.
It was like, whoa, that just
Absolutely.
like slashed it. I mean, we were real micro, so like
And we didn't even cover food. Honestly, we just said
we had no
you're
craft
gonna get your
services.
own food. But
Yeah.
Probably one of the bigger mistakes we ever made was just being like, yeah, we'll just figure out food as we go. And Brando was like, that's all right, because I kind of don't like eating on film sets anyway. So he had his own
Yes.
protocol anyway. And so he was
they
like, I'm
flew
game.
in that night. We went to Kroger and everyone got their shopping, and they had a kitchen in the house that we had rented. And we had one car for the whole cast and crew because it was our one car for
It's
our
our family
family.
car.
Our
Oh,
little
yeah.
Jeep. It's like a 5-seater, or it was a 5-seater. We have a van now, but
We've
that like
we've stepped up.
lugged all the equipment around. That was how everyone was able to get anywhere. They would just
no
we
rental
shared
car.
the Jeep.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just insane
We
to
had
me
the same.
thinking back on that.
Yeah.
I mean, and to me, I guess because I would have no problem doing that if it was with a project that I liked, if it was with people that I enjoyed, because that's one of my big things is
Yeah.
I enjoy the people that I'm with almost more than whatever the story or the project is. And I would be willing to sleep at someone's aunt's house if it was for a fun project that looked like it was going to be a good time.
Yeah.
And so I have a hard time asking for money. I don't, especially with film. I just, it's hard for me on a personal level. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier for me to ask, "Hey, can I crash at your place, or can I house this person
Someone
you've
who has
never
a
met
spare
at your
room.
house?"
Yeah. Like, do you know someone with a spare room or a spare bed or
Yeah,
knows about
easier ask
horses?
for me.
Like, yeah,
That's funny.
it is an easier ask. I love that you brought that up. But then you did put some of your own money in. So was this money that you saved up for a while, or was it just kind of as you went, you had expenses that you covered?
It was dipping into our savings,
Okay.
which, again, allows for a freedom where you're not worried about being in debt to someone else, but it's scary because it's
Yeah.
we don't
Sorry.
get a nest egg. There's no great retirement plans for filmmakers, or, 401ks type things. And so that kind of stinks. That was a hard thing to do.
So why'd you do it?
Because again, I wanted to make the movie, and, I would, I'm now old enough that it's just like, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to wait for someone to call me and ask me to direct a movie. If I had a nickel for every time there was a sure thing, "Hey, I put your name in this hat, you're going to get asked to be this director," or whatever, I would never have to fund another movie again. I mean, everyone's got this project that this is going to be it. This is going to be the one. No, it's not. Like, you have to go and do it yourself, and don't ask for permission to do it. You should ask for permission to film at certain locations, and always abide traffic and safety laws, things like that. Um, but it just seemed like I don't want my kids, whatever they decide to do, to feel like they have to wait for anybody to tell them what they can do. I want them to to look at things and say, if I want to do this, I can make it happen. And I might have to do a weird route to get to it, but I'm gonna do it. So I think it was a little bit of an investment in that. It was an investment just to, if it doesn't work, well, then at least I know I tried. At least I know, uh, like in a sense, it'll be money well spent in that direction.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And that's the other thing though, too, that I think is an interesting part of the film school experience that maybe doesn't get translated as well. You you should, wherever your money is coming from, you need to do a better job at respecting where that money comes from. And if someone gives you a loaf of bread to feed your crew, if someone gives you a house, if someone gives you $10, you need to treat that as pretty sacred, because that's that's an incredible thing, a bit of generosity. And I when you're spending your own money, you see that a little more clearly. You have a little bit more respect for it, because well, that $10 is going to be $10 that I'm not going to have to pay my mortgage or my car payment or whatever it is. Um, and so, yeah, just being grateful and respectful for those things, because
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Well, and responsible, which makes
Yeah,
everything go,
responsible.
it makes everything go farther and be better, both in your relationship account and your monetary
Well, and I think
situation.
part of that respect is also just when you are on someone's set, realizing that there's a lot of sacrifice that made it possible for you to be here, and like
Yeah,
Yeah,
an
well,
attitude of like, I'm grateful to be here. I'm fine to stay in someone's aunt's house. Like, those are the people I like to look for, to work with, who are willing to appreciate what I can give, even if it's not perfect or super professional. Um, yeah. And then you mentioned, so your wife helped you make the
Mhm.
film and she was a UPM on set. You guys put your money in together to help finance it, and you have kids. So how did you guys negotiate the time it would take to film and for both of you to be on set and your kids to be taken care of? That's just a lot.
that's astonishing, because everyone always says, "Oh, you guys are so lucky because you're in film together." But your wife is not a career filmmaker, to my understanding.
No, she's a nurse.
You just support
So
it,
that's
right?
just
So
remarkable.
yeah,
So, like, yeah, let's get into the family side of this,
what
like,
did that look
because
like?
everyone has to deal with this at some point, where it's like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with my
Well, and you
kids?
have a day job, right? So it's like, what
Mhm.
do I do with my day job? How do I shoot this?
How do I make this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily, she had dated me when I was working at the industrial company. Uh, we were married by the time I worked for Best of the West. So she was used to a lot of filmy type things where I'm going to be on set today. I'm going to be gone from 5 a.m. till 10 p.m.
Mhm.
She knows enough about it to be dangerous, I guess. And so a lot of it going in, it wasn't like she was completely coming in without any knowledge or understanding. Um, and she's a nurse, but she reviews medical files. So she's not like in scrubs. She has
Mhm.
a desk job. She worked at Primary Children's for a number of years as the kidney transplant coordinator. So if y'all's kid had a kidney problem, she would facilitate the visits, the appointments, the what your medications your kid need to be on, stuff like that. So she's very logical in her approach. And so having her kind of break down the script and say, we can film this on this day, we can do this, uh, way better than I would ever be at that.
Mhm.
I am not, I'm horrible at that type of stuff. So there's that where it was an easy fit in terms of the crew. Um, Also, to give her more credit than she probably, one thing that drives me crazy about both her and my sister, because they weren't filmies, I think sometimes they were worried about overstepping. And so we were filming one day and Brando had a little bit of powder from there's in the cave we were in, just this fine powder, and he had some on his hat. And I didn't notice it just because of the angle where I was standing. And finally, after like 4 takes, Stacy came up to me and was like, "Hey, his hat has." I was like, "Why did like she's like, "Why didn't want to step over?" And I'm like, "No, you could come talk to me. You're my wife. Like,
Yeah.
come tell me that he's got a smudge." But she's very smart creatively when it comes to like blocking and things like that, even though she probably wouldn't say that about herself, but she has those skills. Um, being in Cody, being in my hometown, we had family. And
Mm.
so I have an aunt who actually lives in Billings, Montana, which is an hour and a half north of Cody. All of her kids were out of the house. They're in, married and off doing their own thing. And so we said, can you watch, at the time we just had our two boys. We said, can you watch them? And so she took our boys for the 2 weeks of principal photography in Wyoming. And she came down. That's my one regret, is that my kids are not in the movie at all. Harrison, our oldest, did film a couple inserts. I let him run the camera. So he did do that. Lincoln, our middle kid, he helped build one of the sets, and he also consulted with me on a lot of the edits. So I, they have their fingerprints in there, is my point. But
That's
they were
cool.
pretty much with my aunt the whole time. And again, that's just luck that we have a huge family that lives in the area.
Yeah.
But that's kind of
Well,
how we
it's smart of
balanced
you
all
to
that.
plan it that way too.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
super
was that
sweet,
over
by the
a
way.
summer break?
I
Or?
love that you wanted to pull your kids
Yeah,
in.
that is sweet.
I think I should probably be more active in getting my kids to help on the back end and
Letting them help, yeah.
Well,
not
let me
casting
ask
them
you,
ever
that's one thing
again.
I want to ask you is how difficult, or what were the challenges of directing your kids as actors? I mean,
So that
what was
yeah,
that like?
Anna
I would never do it again, honestly. Like it was
Anna gets angry because everyone came up at like Ziff, where we just premiered the film, and they're just like,
it's not angry. I just think it's funny.
your kids are amazing actors. They're incredible actors. And I'm like, first of all, can you guys all remember that Anna directed this movie? Like
It's fine.
that's like, but like honestly, like everyone seems to like there is a gender problem with like I DP'd it, I directed it, and I produced it, I mean, and I helped write it. So I mean, I feel a lot of ownership. I hope everyone does who worked on it.
Yeah.
But then people will come up to me and talk to me about my film, and I'm just like, wait, you guys remember like Anna co-wrote and directed this film, and that all the good acting, as if you can call a 5-year-old on camera an actor, because this is a craft, like like
They did a good job.
they did do a good job. It only like Brando, there's one little tiny little scene where Marshall playing Eli has to run in the door and say, this is tricky. Script wise, we were like, how the heck is this gonna look? I lost my sister. We gotta go find her. Okay, how are we gonna do this? We did that. I think we knew we were gonna have to shoot a different angle every take because we were gonna
The
have to
sun was setting so
cut that
fast.
thing together because we knew that it was gonna be really hard for Marshall to deliver these lines, which were sort of ambiguous, and it was a weird, tricky scene. I think we shot well over 19 takes on that.
Wow.
And Brando said, I don't think I've ever shot anything that many times over and over like that. And the scene works, but don't let anyone think that my little boy is this kid that you're gonna hire like Brad Pitt, and it's like, we have 2 takes, you better kill it. Because these aren't
I
craftspeople,
mean,
they're
he laid
children.
down
Yeah.
in the middle of the pathway when we had our whole cast and crew and we are shooting, and all he had to do was like walk or run down the path. I don't
Hit
remember
a
if it was
mark or
walking or running.
something.
No lines or anything. And he just laid down and he was like, I'm tired. I don't want to do it anymore. And we were, I tried to kind of like bribe him and
The
encourage
worst
him and like,
parents
just
ever.
like we've got
We'll
all these people here. We just need one more shot. Like
we'll give you when you have that much pressure and you actually are like trying to parent, but you're also trying to make something with other people's money, and you're like, I will give you whatever you want, child.
Yeah.
Like,
please.
do you want to try alcohol today? Like, I'm just kidding. It's like just we become terrible humans, and then it's
But it
like
didn't work. And he was just like, he was done. So we were done. We had to send everyone home.
we had days where we
And
literally sent everyone home because I
and they
I'll
are
just
not,
yeah.
so I'm fine with non-actors. I actually think, especially with children, I don't like working with actors. I like to, because they just can't be good yet, and so you just find a kid that feels right for the role. In our case, we wrote it around our kids because those were our resources, right?
Yeah.
We've got them, we might as well use them.
Taika
Yeah.
Waititi talks about Hemsworth and him both having their kids on Thor 4, and he's just like, yeah, it was just cheaper.
We thought it would be cheaper, you know, like instead of getting childcare, we'll just put them in the movie and we'll watch them while we make a movie.
Worst
Great
idea.
idea, right? Um, and so anyway, they were not natural on camera. But I think normally with a non-actor, you just want to do camera tests and make sure that they can show up, that they can say a line or two, that they don't like have any weird quirks or looking at the camera. My kids had all those things, all sorts of quirks, and they would look at the camera and they would
Bite their
do
cheek.
weird things with their mouth. And
So I think the big strategy that helped them feel so good in the film, if I say so on behalf of my wife, was that she had the wherewithal to direct the scenes in a way that she put the burden on the professional actors to
Hmm.
lead us into the scene, literally, including me, camera operating. Usually the actor would lead us into the space where the child already was, and then the actor would have the burden of leading the child through the scene and getting what we needed while I covered the scene and got what we needed. And so
Yeah.
it was a very improvisational situation, but we were able to tell the story that way without the children going, being kind of like, ugh,
we did
like
as little acting from them as possible. So a lot of that was sort of, I mean, people say that we improved this, but really only the scenes with the children were kind of improved.
the
Everything was
children were
scripted, but
improving more than the adult actors, although the adult
it was
actors
scripted even when we improved. But we
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
the adults say, like, try to make this happen as much as you can.
lead them into the script,
Yeah, but
I,
they didn't really have scripted lines very
even
often.
improvisation itself is a craft. So I have to say that the adult actors were improvising within the boundaries of a story, whereas the children were improvising within the boundaries of reality. Like they were just,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
But I feel like that I feel like that comes across quite. I mean, again, there's several scenes in there where it did feel like, yeah, I know exactly what that feels like when they're doing the bath time or when they're, those little moments where and I don't even know how you would script that really
Yeah,
to have it. You know what I mean? Like, I
right.
mean, unless you somehow did have a 5-year-old Marlon Brando who just like, I shouldn't pick Marlon Brando because that gets confusing with
Yeah.
our Brando, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think that whenever I make a film that has children, I'll probably just like not script as much as possible and just add them in the scene. Like they're just another thing that the actors are working with in the scene. But we did tell them like this is a game. We're playing a game, and in the game, Brando is your daddy and Scout is your mommy, and you guys are, have different names. And so it was just this game we were playing with them for a few weeks. And
yeah,
so they could understand like we're stepping into play, and kids are good at that. So they could kind of do that.
So that they would respond to the names. That was actually my biggest concern was
Yeah.
like, if he says Eli, will Marshall turn his head? Like,
right, right.
and he did.
Yeah. And will he call them
He
mom and dad? And like
they did really well
they
with
did
that.
great.
Way
Yeah.
better than I thought they would.
Mhm.
It wasn't a, I wasn't worried about the actors. I was worried about the kids
Yeah,
even just cooperating, which they didn't cooperate in other ways, but that wasn't that they were pretty good at that. They're good at role playing.
no, they did a great job. You did
So
a good
Yeah.
job directing them.
sorry, that was a
Anyway,
lot.
that was a tangent, but yeah, it's a good question. It's something we've thought a lot about, clearly. But I wanted to ask you some more things. So now your film is done. I feel like, just to finish
Yeah,
out the story of making this film, and I'm sure there's so many details that we don't even have time to include,
yeah.
but the film is done, it's released, you can go see it on Prime and Fandango, right?
I don't know if it's on Fandango.
Oh,
Prime,
oh,
Vudu, Comcast, Xfinity, Spectrum, Cox, maybe.
okay.
And it's iTunes soon, but I don't know when it's gonna be. I don't know when it's
Oh,
gonna be on
great.
iTunes,
Yeah, yeah, that one's kind of
but
tricky.
sooner or later.
Um, so are you working with a distributor? Like, how are you feeling about that part of the process? Do you feel good about like financially? Do you think you're going to make your money back, or how long do you think that will take? Did you do deferred pay with anybody on the set? Um, those are things I'm wondering about. And then, I mean, you said you pulled out of your own savings, but I know sometimes filmmakers do loans. I don't know if that was something you guys considered or did, but I'd love to hear kind of the financial back end now. And I know it's early, like
It is
Yeah,
early.
yeah,
it's too
yeah. No,
early to
sure.
really know, but
So we played at a whole bunch of festivals, and again, festivals are definitely a mixed bag.
yeah.
But again, we tried to be strategic with the ones that we entered into because because I am wherever I live, I'm still going to be based out of Cody, Wyoming in terms of making movies. Because of that, we entered more Western film festivals or what film festivals that were friendly to Westerns, because the networking that could happen there would potentially benefit a future Western movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we got into the Wyoming International Film Festival, which was kind of the only one that I was like, I really want to get into that one because it's Wyoming. And we did really, really well at that film festival, which is probably no surprise. Although I will say there was every movie that I went to probably 3 programming blocks, and every movie there was just mind-blowingly amazing. They
Mm-hmm.
had a bunch of filmmakers from Spain who came and showed their movies, and I mean, just holy cow, really amazing films. But we had started to reach out to some distributors, some agents, things like that. And then while we were in that process, we actually got a phone call from this company, Porter Craig, and they actually had a scout at the Wyoming Film Festival. And I was kind of like,
You
really, like
don't
that?
think at small film festivals, but they do. Yeah, they
They
have.
do. And talking with the people there, they were saying, look, Sundance has plenty of people who are there. The Cannes Film Festival has plenty of people that are there. We go to these smaller ones because we can find the diamonds in the rough, and we can find things that, you know, aren't going to play at these Sundance Film Festivals. So they kind of approached us and made us an offer. And again, with my first movie, not the Counterfeit Kid, we had a great. It got distributed through Lionsgate, but you know, I never really saw any money off of that. I
Mm.
don't know how well it did. I mean, I can certainly read the reviews and know how well it did, but financially, I don't know that it did. It made a splash. Um, so there is kind of that flying blind aspect to it. But Porter Craig, uh, we did a big phone call with them, and they had actually produced a documentary that I really really loved about Roger Corman, the filmmaker.
Hmm.
And so I kind of had heard of them. I knew of them. I'd seen that movie, and everything that they did just felt very transparent, felt very upfront. There was none of that, like, this is going to be the next Napoleon Dynamite and here's your ticket to the stars. None of that. It felt very much like, this is a great indie adventure film that we think we can make some waves with, and so that you can get another movie going.
Mm.
Not, you don't need to worry about your financial future. This is going to provide for you and your family for generations to come. There was none of that. And I appreciated that fact that it didn't feel like they were just, you know,
Lying to get your
telling me what I
business.
wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. They felt very realistic and transparent about it. And they've been fabulous. I still have my day job in California. And when I've gone out there, I've gone to dinner with them a couple times, and um, we'll email them and talk to them about different things. And I've really just had a great experience working with them. It is still too early to really know what the finances are going to look like in terms of what we'll make. Um, so I don't know. I mean, that is the scary part about it, and
Yeah.
I'd be happy to tell you all when I have some numbers to report. But
Yeah.
um,
You probably made like
yeah,
$5 or $6 last night.
hey, I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe. Yeah. So was it kind of a revenue share deal, or what kind of a deal, without, you don't have to be super specific if
No,
you don't
yeah.
want to, but what kind of deal did you make?
So that and I might be getting the exact figures incorrect because it's been a while since I looked at the contract, but right now there's a like a 60-40 split until they reach their cap, which is pretty, I have to say, pretty modest. Once they reach their cap, and so we're still getting money off
Mm-hmm.
off every download right from jump. We're making money at the same time, and then once they reach their cap, then it becomes 80-20 or something like that. Um,
Like it
again,
reverses, or they get
we
more?
get 80, they get 20.
Yeah.
And I think it's a 7 or 10 year contract,
Mm-hmm.
with an option to renew and an option to, if they were to find someone, like they're going to present it at the Cannes Film Festival, if they found someone there who wanted to buy it outright for some miracle experience, that's in there where we can do whatever. The other thing they allowed us to do, which I really appreciated, is they allowed us to keep a bunch of the other rights where, like, we have a sequel to the Counterfeit Kid that's in radio drama format.
Mm.
And like, we have the rights to do that. If we wanted to sell shirts, if we wanted to sell cowboy hats that have the, I mean, I don't know what types of things we could think of, but we have the rights to do all of that stuff. They even allowed me to do a screening where we were able to take home the money from that screening.
Mm.
And so to me, that was a really just generous and really awesome part of it, where they seemed to be interested in taking care of us.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to
That
hear.
was good. Yeah, I think the biggest red flag is not necessarily always in the details of the deal. It's more, is this person flexible and is this person honest? Like,
Yeah.
just there's so many dishonest, predatory distributors that people talk nightmares about. And so that's something that we're in the middle of with our film. We have not signed, and we have called and done our due diligence with every distributor we've talked to, with filmmakers who have worked with those distributors. Like, what was your experience? How much should you expect? What was your movie like? Can we see the trailer for your film? Tell us about the experience. You know, like really asking deep questions. And so it's lucky for, what was the company you're working with?
They're Porter and Craig.
Porter and
Porter and
Craig.
Craig Media, or Film and Media, I think.
Luckily for Porter and Craig, you had only good things to say on the podcast, so that's good.
Well, I mean, I will say the other big thing, and this goes back to what we were talking about with just the production side of things. Plenty of the distributors that we talked to were upfront, friendly, great people. But they kind of just, they seemed that it was kind of just like, yeah, I think we can make this work. Or they had kind of not a lackadaisical approach, but Porter and Craig were like bringing up scenes from the movie that they liked
Yeah.
and talking about it in a way that felt like you didn't just watch the trailer and, oh, there's a priest, right? Like, it's like, no, you actually know the story arc that the priest goes through in Counterfeit Kid. Like, they had so many things like that that just felt, and again, there is just kind of a gut level thing, because
Mm.
that's again where some of these podcasts, I don't put a lot of stock into them, because everything is so different. Your movie and my movie are completely different genres, so the marketability of them is going to be approached differently. So my experience might not really translate. My first movie was a horror film, and so that's a completely, and there was still a lot of direct to DVD type things
Yeah.
at that time. That's completely different than anything that I've worked on since then. And so my experience then, there's maybe principles that I could take from that and apply them, but it's not the same thing. And so
Yeah.
again, sometimes you hear these people say like, "Oh, you just got to find an agent who will do this." And it's like, "Do you? Like, is that gonna, like, that's not gonna sell your movie the same way that, I don't know." I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, you have to
I
find something specific to you and that works to you, and it helps when people actually know your film and it's not just another one on the list. It's like, I like this movie. I want it to do well, not just financially for myself, but like because I am passionate about the movie.
And creatively, that gives us a lot of leeway, I think, when we actually understand that principle. Because I've had distributors tell us, like, if you just done this or this with your movie, you could have made a lot of money with it. And I'm like, you could have made a lot of money with it because you do a certain thing a certain way with a certain kind of movie. It's like, if you would have just made it more like what we sell, but it's like they have like a very narrow view sometimes. And so you have to find the right distributor that's like, we know just how to market this. We know
well,
we know there's an audience for this. We have that audience in our email list or in our social followers. Like, we know these people we know who wants what you've
This
made.
kind of movie, yeah.
yeah.
And so, and even some people, you have to do the work to find those people yourself as a filmmaker. So
Well, and we had one guy, and I feel horrible that I can't remember his name. Um, Kind of early on, that he works in film distribution in LA, and he's a really good friend of a friend. And he watched the movie, loved the movie, but he's like, the movies that I distribute are like Saw, or like, they're like these, they're not even horror movies, they're like super graphic gore, super violent, super, like, ours is a family friendly Western. Like, but I appreciate the fact that he's like, I can't do anything for you. Like, all of my connections are He's like, you make a monster movie where someone's head gets bitten off and there's blood everywhere, call me. But he's like, I can't, but I appreciated the fact that he was very upfront about that.
Mhm.
And again, Porter and Craig have just been amazing where they've allowed us to be part of these decisions as well, where we have a couple other movie posters that we have designed besides the one you see behind me that are designed for different approaches to selling the movie. And they allowed us to be part of that. They didn't just do, and that's a stupid thing. I don't have any ego about the poster really, but I appreciate the fact that they incorporated us in that decision-making process
Yeah.
and allowed us to be part of that, and it made
Yeah.
sense. It made sense why they were doing what they were doing. It's a business. It's not just art. So
It's both though.
yeah,
Yeah. So when we can collaborate
Yeah, it
together.
lets everything have a little more integrity when you don't shove someone off and say, shut up.
we'll take it from
I'm
here.
gonna do
Yeah,
this part. Yeah. On both ends. Like sometimes filmmakers are like, don't touch it. And it's like, okay, but like communicate with us. Like it's like we can
yeah,
figure this out together so that
Yeah.
we can represent it. Because if you misrepresent it, even if it's good business sense, it's bad business sense because then people aren't getting what they're expecting and then it
yeah.
gets really bad. And so yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. And I hate to wrap this up, but we are pretty tight on time now. But I really appreciate all of your insights and just want to leave with two more questions that are small. One is, are there any last like tips or advice that you want to give to filmmakers who are just starting out, from what you learned or things you would have done differently? And then two is just any information you want to share about what's next or where to go see your movie.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me is, and I'm gonna again, I'm horrible with names. Uh, but one thing that I really loved, the filmmaker, is it Rebecca Thomas?
Yeah.
Mm,
Um, I was with you guys, I guess, actually,
the
when I
writers'
saw her
conference.
speak at the
Yeah.
writers conference. But one thing she said that I loved, and I just thought was some of the best advice I've ever heard, is there's already people in LA and New York making LA and New York stories. Find something that's unique about where you are and make that story because people want to see. Again, we always talk about diversity in film, and I'm a big advocate for that. I think that's great, but it still tends to be, let's just talk about diversity with people who live in LA. It's like, well, but there's the whole world where you have these things. And so I, you know, I'm all about making a movie in Georgia, in Wyoming, in wherever you're from. Find something that you can tell a story about there and lean into that. Don't try to be an LA movie that's filming in Cody, Wyoming, because it's not going to work. Or it's going to take a lot more effort that you could that would be better put elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a
So
lost
find,
opportunity. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and celebrate the diversity that you have in that way.
Mhm.
Um, so that would be, I guess, kind of my big advice is just to rip off her, and I think that was some of the best advice I've ever heard. And then yeah, in terms of the movie, um, we have a couple more scripts that we're trying to use this to facilitate. We have one about Buffalo Bill, and again, this is kind of my I don't have any dark, gritty film inside of me. I think that there's plenty of westerns that are currently available that are kind of fulfilling that need or that want economically. I like more popcorn and family. When I say family, I don't mean it's made for little kids. I think one of the great things about when I grew up is that all the movies had that component to them where you could take, even if it was an adult movie, it was safe for a kid to watch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if they walk in, you're not like, "Oh no, don't."
Right. And
No.
so that's the type of thing. So all the westerns that I have are kind of more in that vein of just, hopefully approachable from anybody who wants to just have a good time and again have that. I hope there's some things in Counterfeit Kid that people come away and uh, think that's a great little message or that they can relate to one of the characters. And one of the best experiences was we did a test screening, and one of my best friends is a Marine. He's just tough as nails. Uh, but the character he related to the most was Jerry, the priest, and the arc that the priest has of kind of that little redemption that spoke to I thought he would like kind of some of the more of the, fisticuffs and the people who are a little bit more fiery, and he really related to the priest. And so I don't just mean they're just popcorn and entertainment where you can just turn off your mind. I just mean that they're a spoonful of sugar, right? We can talk about good things and try to make the world a better place. But it's available on Amazon. Any reviews helps the algorithm, I'm told. So if you watch it, leave a little comment. Amazon, Vudu, and they're going to make a big push for it in a bunch of European markets here in the next. So I don't know how extensive your listening network is, but if you're in Europe, it's on the way.
I'm not sure. But yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for your time and for all your insights. I think they're really valuable, and it's been just fun to catch up.
And
And
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, you guys are doing a great thing. So keep it up.
thank
Same.
you.
Thanks so much, Matthew.